Hello everyone, it is probably Thursday or Friday and it's somewhere at the end of June or the beginning of July. This is the end of week 2, and it's also the end of most of the culture part of the syllabus bullet points in the 1 to 3 weeks. Next week, talk about ethics and also talk about leadership a little bit, and then the following week we move on, but you still have an extra week to do your task. You have until the end of week 4 to finish it. So I'm just going to get into it here. This is about Hofstede, and I really think you can use it to make applications for your project, especially when you're comparing Vietnam to another country that you're working on. So let me give Hofstede a couple minutes so you can listen to him. He's been doing this for a long time, and just a brief introduction to his ideas and why he chose to do this and make this project.
I have to explain what I mean by culture, and actually I'm building on the development of social anthropology in, say, the past 100 years. There was a time that people had a tendency to distinguish wild people and civilized people, and there were actually different kind of people completely. And then the development of social anthropology in the first half of the 20th century argued that all human societies were coping with the same kind of basic problems, but every society had found its own answers to that over time. That related to the concept of culture. Culture, in a sense, means that it is a way of acting, feeling and thinking shared by most members of a particular society. And that is culture in the anthropological sense. The moment that conscience has evolved, then the question became, well, if they have a limited number of basic problems, what are these basic problems, and how do they cope with those problems? And then in my time, let's say the time I started to occupy myself with this, we had the possibility of analyzing these problems with the help of information processing methods, computers actually. We compared societies by using a certain number of questions which we asked to comparable samples of people from the various societies. Thus, by the analysis we did, we could detect what were the problems that were common everywhere and how the problems were resolved, what were the differences. And that we called dimensions of societal cultures. And in my work, there is a list of 6 dimensions now. I started with 4, but over time they have grown to 6, and these are the 6 dimensions. And what are the basic problems? The basic problems are, first of all, how does a society handle inequality? That we call power distance. And if there is a lot of inequality, then we call it large power distance, and if there is little inequality, we call it small power distance. Then the second dimension is to what extent are individuals dependent on the people around them. And if there is relatively little dependence on other people, at least that is what people strive for, we call that individualist societies. And if there is a lot of relationship, a lot of dependence between people who live close together, we call that collectivist societies. Third one is, what is the emotional meaning of having been born as a woman or as a man, as a girl or as a boy? And because obviously there is a biological difference, and men cannot have babies, but there is also...
Yeah, so there you go. You learned something new today. I understand this one two different ways. I don't think he explains this one very well, but we'll talk about it more.
In the kind of emotions that women are supposed to have, men are supposed to have, and that differs very clearly between one society and another. And that has also consequences for behavior and consequences for the social structure of the society. And that I have called masculinity, if there is a lot of difference, and femininity, if there is relatively little difference. And the next problem is how a society deals with the unknown. Obviously, the essence of living is that you never know what will happen tomorrow. You may expect what happened tomorrow, but you never know until it has happened. So there is always the unknown, and now some societies have developed a greater stability, a greater resistance to dealing with the unknown. They're relatively easygoing in face of the unknown, and other societies are very tight. They want to know and to control as much as possible what will happen. And I've called that uncertainty avoidance. And if a society is tight, if a society wants to control the unknown, then I call it a strong uncertainty avoiding society. And if it's easygoing, I call it a weak uncertainty avoiding society. Those were the four original dimensions. And then over time, we found two more dimensions in data that were made available to us afterwards. And one is what I call time perspective. Some societies tend to look far ahead in the future, and some societies tend to work especially on the short term, and they are very much concerned with, let's say, what will happen this quarter or this year.
So that could happen for a couple reasons. That could happen because you're in hyper-capitalism and everything is on a short-term basis. All supply chains are very connected. There's a system that's running, maximizing a lot of efficiencies, and so to measure that is every 3 months. But you also have to look at it like Maslow and say, okay, then you have countries that have really poorly functioning systems, and people's main concern is just survival, right? They don't have a long-term orientation. So you actually have to have a long-term orientation, you have to have kind of a history of that, and you have to have some stability.
And that is called long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Our last dimension is about how a society, or the people in a society, deal with their natural drives. And we are all humans, and we all have certain drives. We have feelings which we can express, and we can feel happy, and we can dance, and we can laugh, and we can make love, and things like that. And in some societies, the expression of those drives is actually encouraged, it's tolerated, it's normal. And in other societies, the expression of such drive is considered sinful or unwanted, and people are supposed to control them, or society is supposed to control them. And in this case, we use the term from indulgence to restraint. Indulgence are societies where natural drives can be admitted, are even encouraged, And restrained societies are societies where natural drives should be controlled.
Okay, that's a fairly brief introduction. Let's go to something here. I think they did a pretty good job with this in the Mind Tools. I'll put the link up in the classroom. So yeah, there are the 6 elements. I will go through them again, and this time I'm going to go through them with an application idea, like how you might apply them. Again, to repeat, a difference of 10 in the 0 to 100s would be something that you would notice. Something that you would have like a sense that there was a difference between you and your maybe acquisition partner or your negotiation partner. And when you went to that country, you would feel it. You would feel it. So, by its nature, a theory like this only describes a central tendency in society. Different organizations, teams, personalities, and environments vary widely. So, make sure you're familiar with the actual company and the leadership of that company that you'll be working in. So, yeah, I think you can say, it's like when I'm negotiating and I say that, my wife, this is the price, and I say, oh, my wife would not feel good if I paid that much for this. I'm trying to put pressure in a cultural sense on the negotiation. I'm trying to use the idea that other people would not accept this. So even if you have a partner in your negotiation, the culture is going to affect that person, right? You might have a nice idea of the agreement you can make with that decision maker, but then when it comes to, they go and talk to their friends, and then their friends say, oh my God, how could you make a contract like that? You should do it this way. This is the way we do it. Push them back and renegotiate again. So even though, it's like when I used to negotiate with the Seon driver for a price. I would never walk up to a driver who was in a group, because this guy's going to get all kinds of pressure from his friends who are going to be laughing at him about the negotiation, trying to push him in a direction to push the price whatever higher. I don't know, because I'm a foreigner or whatever. But it was always harder to do negotiation when there was a group of people who had similar cultural values, that they were all, that there was pressure put on them to get, they had pressure coming together, people couldn't think for themselves. They were a product of their culture. Anyway, power distance, I think I described this briefly last time. Power distance, I think, is fairly easy to understand in the sense that not everyone can go to the hierarchies and higher levels of the society. There's this difference, a class difference that cannot be bridged. There's not a lot of, this leads to pride though. This leads to a pride, a cultural pride in England, as I said before. The working class is, separate. No one went from working class to upper class, to king, right, or whatever. So there's a very, very huge power distance, but at the same time, there was cultural solidarity in each class. And that still actually happens in England today. There's kind of this feeling of like, oh, which class are you? Which is very weird considering that it's a post-industrial society. Okay, power distance indicates that people understand their place in the system. I think that's exactly what I was describing. The people, if your place is there is no place, that you actually have a chance to move from place to place, then your power distance will be much lower. According to the model, Malaysia, okay, that's a monarchy. I think they have some kind of king. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But there's so in a situation like this, people will not initiate any action. They will be guided and directed to it'll take an authoritarian management style to deal with them. So, what are the tips for a high PDI? Well, I mean, first of all, by definition, you're centralized, larger, and authority and seniority mean everything. Tip: acknowledge a leader's status. As an outsider, you may try to go around the power, but don't disrespect to their face. That's probably what happens a lot. Also, be aware that you might not get the answers that you're looking for at the lower levels of hierarchy. You have to go to the top to get a real answer or a decision. In low PDI countries, there tends to be more teamwork, more democratic, shared decision making and group group formulation, group understanding. In this case, you don't need to. It would be weird to show some unusual respect or to call someone Mr. all the time, and they would say, no, just call me Dave, okay? I'm Dave. No Mr. Dave, okay? So it would be less formal. In this case, there's a real delegation of authority and decision making. So a little bit difference there. Look at some of the countries you can imagine here in power distance. A lot of the countries that are very conservative, they have a high power distance. Bangladesh is quite, most Arabian countries, very high. China, no one's going to go there and become king, right? Denmark and a lot of the northern European countries tend to have a lower power distance, although Great Britain, I don't think we can really get, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's very tricky. To become prime minister in that country, Jeremy Corbyn got kind of close, so I guess it's possible. India, again, very conservative country, and those countries tend to have their power based on something, a mandate from heaven, a god, something connected to the religion of the country. Singapore, however, just has a gangster family who basically controls it, and there's no getting away from the Lee Kuan Yews of the world. Japan, a little bit less. Japan doesn't have a huge class system. It's quite socialist. So then we can imagine where's Vietnam on this. And it turns out that it's quite a high power distance. It's not impossible. You can join the party. You can work your way up to the top over many, a lot of time. You can be part of that a bit. Some of the countries that we think are, I wonder if they adjust them, because I think the United States is probably worse than it used to be. If we look at this now, it says 40, it's the same as the other one. It's a question. It's kind of a weird power structure in the US. I guess you can join it, but you also, it's not so different. You have to sell your soul to join this. Let's think of another country that might be, Australia obviously has got a pretty low one. Even lower than the US, but similar. A country that we think has a lot of openness and democratic association would be the Netherlands, I guess, would be one. They have like 50 political parties, so anybody can join the politics. So yeah, the Netherlands is even lower. I don't know who's the lowest though. Could be them. Czech Republic's pretty. Yeah, Czech Republic's weird. People don't really want to join. Well, that's good. These are the countries I know like the best in the world, so I'll leave those up. So then, from that, we have the idea of an individualistic culture versus a collectivist culture. I'd say, the way that people rally about things in some countries is quite shocking for me. I'm from a truly individualistic culture, and the way that, and I think I described this on the last video, like the way that children are raised is based on that. That's what a successful parent does. Whereas a successful parent in a collectivist culture keeps the children tight to the family, and the family is usually tight to the area or region where they live. So it's a stronger connection to the local social relationships. A high IDV score indicates weak interpersonal connection among those who are not part of a core family. Here, people take less responsibility for others' actions and outcomes. So, probably if I'm walking down the street, well, there's different things at play, right? Someone else, if I wasn't wearing a mask, there might be some people who are like, oh, just let people do what they want to do, and then there's going to be other people who are going to try to, everybody's going to have a different response. Some people are going to say, you should be wearing a mask. I'm vaccinated. Maybe they push that, In a collectivist society, people are supposed to be loyal to the group, and it's a lot easier to get us all to follow the COVID thing, for example. In exchange, the group will defend their interests. The group itself is normally larger, and people take responsibility for one another's well-being. Nothing is perfect, right? Nothing is perfect. I mean, you can say that the Americans are so individual that they will, I don't think this is on the dimensions, but if there's an accident on the road, for example, people immediately stop and try to help. If there's a disaster like the World Trade Center or a hurricane, people can be they're pretty quick to help and, run to you, and, if you fall down and you slip on something slippery and you fall and you hit your head, people are going to come up to you and say, are you all right? With a serious face. In Vietnam, they're going to laugh if you fall down on the ground. If you get hit by a motorbike on the road and it's a hit and run, people don't wait around, they run away. They don't stop to see what's going on. So there's two different things there. I guess one of them maybe is a relationship to the law. I'm not sure if this is in Hofstede's calculation. I think it should be. In this case, the relationship to the law in the United States is that if I stop and help somebody, it's not going to create more problems for me. It's an accident. Accidents are accidents. They are not always somebody's fault. Somebody's not always going to be penalized for this. There's just accidents. And in Vietnam, it's like if you stop and you try to help somebody after you have an accident with them, people are worried they're going to have to pay money. They're going to worry about their responsibility for that. And the police are not, they don't trust that the law is going to accept that the accident nature of the situation. So that's a weird one. That's a really weird one. So I think, definitely Vietnam, we all know it to be very, very collectivist, relative to other countries. Czech Republic is kind of half-half. Czechs are like, yeah, kind of have this thing where we kind of get together, but we also really don't want to, talk to each other half the time. So I guess another way you might see this in real life is that you would go, maybe think about, let's say you go overseas and you see another person from your country. What's the potential that you want to talk to that person? Just because someone's American doesn't mean I want to talk to them at all. There's no like, hey, we're both from the same country. No, we're from there's 7,000 countries in the US. They're all different. In Vietnam, I think that a lot of people would probably be happy to, oh, you understand me, there's more of a connection. And I think Czechs are kind of in the middle. There is a little bit of solidarity, but it's like, no, I don't really need to hang out with you, kind of thing. All right, how do you apply this? In an individualistic country, people's time and their own personal time and freedom is valued, meaning that they don't want to waste time. They're not patient. They're not very patient. There is a good respect of privacy and a kind of need for some self-actualization in the structure of their work. How do you make them happy? Well, or how do you manage them? You acknowledge them. You just say, okay, you're doing a good job. We notice that you're doing well. Keep work and social life a bit apart. And that's for the same reason I gave last time. It's not that I don't want to know you, it's just that I don't want to put a responsibility extra on you and your life and time to pretend to be my friend or feel like you have to put time into this relationship because you have a family, you have your own friends, you have your own life. I don't want to be extra burdensome on that. A lot of debate, individualistic culture, low individualistic culture. Emphasis on building skills and becoming a master of something. Interesting. I can't really guess why. People work for intrinsic rewards. Maintaining harmony is more important than other issues that come up. So even if there's some deals that might be great deals, sometimes it's better just to not have everybody divisive and attacking each other. Just give up on that. So someone has to know how to make those decisions. So someone's got to be, speaking for the group and have some wisdom that people respect. That could be based on simple things like age, seniority. Individual feelings and emotions should be kept to yourself to keep the harmony of the situation. People are very sensitive about being criticized in public. All of these things very much sound like, what I experience here. Saying no can cause loss of face unless it's intended to be polite. Like, no, I'm not going to take that gift from you 3 times in China. So I think that's fair. I think those are fair things to understand about those cultural differences. Again, there's a dramatic difference between Vietnam and the United States. And, we learn from each other. I learned from my wife. I think I'm better now at understanding, that my needs are not only, are always more important than the groups, that I should consider the examples and the effects of my behavior and decisions on the group. So I think that's really good. On the other hand, my wife, she takes some qualities from me, and now she doesn't really, if it's a poorly run organization or a corrupt organization, she'll just charge right through it and say, you know, no, this is wrong. And it shocks people into actually having to do something when normally they could just rely on the inefficiency of Vietjet, for example, or some other government agency. She sees a benefit in, you know, sometimes just going through this. The system is actually not functioning for us, and so we need to make it work for us. So I think we learn from each other, which is interesting. This one, masculinity and femininity. It's not, it sounds like men and women, but I think it's just a way to generalize about how much logic takes the, let's say, precedence, or is the main factor in a decision, rather than maybe it's the wrong day, we should check the calendar and make sure that this is the best day to get married. You know, a German would say, wait, the marriage depends on the factors of the people and the, you know, the history and the quality of their you know, time that they spend, and of their history of commitment. And in Vietnam, you just pick the right day. If it's a lucky day, then you're good. It's all good. So we can imagine this kind of more intuition-based, but not huge differences. Not huge differences here between the countries. Maybe Vietnam is a little bit more superstitious, a little bit more bent on intuition. Let's try to imagine a culture that is, I don't know. So I'm looking at Angola here. Angola, very low in masculinity. Does it mean this African country is less masculine? No, it means that they're more dependent for their beliefs on fates and gods, and not so much on what is the logical choice. So quite interesting mix there. We try another one. Bangladesh, very religious country, but also a bit logic-based, so that's interesting. Brazil's a bit in the middle, but also less individualistic. Everybody loves Finland. Why Finland? Finland is so boring. God, it's boring. They're almost 57 in everything. Boring, Finland. Boring. 57, always. Their masculinity is pretty low. I didn't know that Finnish people were so superstitious. So that's kind of interesting. I guess we could learn something from that. Philippines, kind of logical based, but very low individualism. Philippines, incredible power distance. You don't get to be in that power group. Let's see, one more for illustration. Thailand is probably kind of interesting. So Thailand is very Buddhist, and you're always praying. You know, you're praying, you're lighting incense. There's Buddhas everywhere. There's a lot of water being thrown on these Buddhas, and because of that, there's a lot of belief in luck. There's a lot of belief that what happens is not really controlled by any particular decision that you're making. So that's quite interesting, right? Thailand is even quite different from Vietnam in that way, or more extreme. Uncertainty, avoidance. So what is it? Okay, first, what does masculine and femininity mean for application? The gap between men's and women's values, or logic versus intuition, is largest in Japan and Austria, with scores of 95 and 79 respectively. In both countries, men score highly for exhibiting tough masculine values. It's all about logic, and that's what it's about. As we highlight, Japan has the high score, whereas Sweden has the lowest of these. Therefore, if you open an office in Japan, you should recognize that you are operating from a very hierarchical, deferential, patriarchal society, but it's very driven by this logic. At the same time, Japan is a culture where all children learn the value of competition and winning from a young age. So these traits of competitiveness would be something that everyone would have, not just some people. So that's interesting. So I guess you could be an individualistic culture like Sweden, but really have an education system that gets people to think in terms of teamwork and cooperation at the same time, whereas you can have a very collectivist Japanese way of thinking, but at the same time create a very competitive culture. So that's interesting. Japan and Sweden, we should compare those. So there, that masculinity. So even though the individualism is higher in Sweden, the energy for cooperation in their organizational structures is still pretty high. Whereas in Japan, not as individualistic at all, but yet once they're inside a hierarchy, once they're inside a system, there's a lot of competition. So, but you have to play the game, right? You're trying to save face for the others as you try to kill them behind their back. That sounds crazy. Whereas in Sweden, right, you're trying to work together, but you're all really thinking about yourselves. Very weird. But I guess you can feel that if you went there, right? All right, high masculine, strong egos, a lot of pride, achievement, money, comparisons are very materialistic. Tips: be aware of the possibility of differentiated gender roles, but they might actually have the same values. Long hours culture, probably, because of the competition level. No one's going to sit down and slow down. People are also motivated by precise targets and being able to show that they achieve them, to take that achievement mentality. Low masculine, relationship-oriented, more focused on quality of life for the group. And that's what you see in Sweden. Even though Swedes are individualistic, they have a good social system. All education is paid for, as well as healthcare, and they're not trying to, there are certain basic levels of societal, maybe hygiene factors that are accepted by everyone. Success is more likely to be achieved through negotiation, working together, and input. Workplace flexibility and work-life balance are probably values that will be appreciated in that situation. broader comparison here. The highlights, Denmark, most of Scandinavia, Norway, you can see here, Netherlands. Japan is the opposite. US is somewhat more competitive. I mean, you think the US would be super competitive, but it's not as competitive as in Japan. I guess you would just expect to be, everybody wants to stab you in the back all the time. There's not major differences in those countries. Fourth factor, uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainty avoidance. This can play out in a few different ways. Number one, how much risk people are willing to take. What kind of contracts you're going to write. How long. What kind of relationship you need to have with the partner that you're making your relationship with. Again, that goes back to negotiation as well. Do you have to be friendly and have a bigger relationship with someone before you can do business with them? So, let me check this camera first. So, yeah, and then you have, societies where it's like, well, we'll worry about that later. We don't have to worry about it now. It's too much stress. We'll just enjoy what we're doing. So, in societies that score highly for uncertainty avoidance, people attempt to make life as predictable and controllable as possible. You can imagine those very religious countries again. If they can find that they can't control their own lives, they may be tempted to stop trying. These people may refer to mañana, or put their fate into the hands of God. People in low countries of uncertainty avoidance are more relaxed or open or inclusive. Interesting here that we have this uncertainty is not necessarily the same as avoiding risk. Hofstede argues that you may find people in high-scoring countries who are prepared to engage in risky behavior precisely because it reduces ambiguities in order to avoid failure. So people will take risks to get to take a risk to try to get security. So if that makes sense, it's like a hip hop song, get rich or die trying. That's the goal. Interesting, kind of interesting. Here they're comparing Greece with Singapore, which seems, Greece. And Singapore. So Greece is blue, Singapore is green. Very dramatic there. Greek culture, they're trying really hard. Their economy is horrible too, which is weird. And Singapore's economy is very, very good, but they're not really that worried about it or trying to think about, they're still, open to taking, to the short-term elements of, it's very, very interesting, very, very interesting. Therefore, during a meeting in Greece, you might be keen to generate discussion because you recognize that there's a cultural tendency for the team members to make the safest, most conservative decision despite any emotional outbursts. So whatever happens at the end, they're going to choose the most conservative option. Your aim is to encourage them to be more open to different ideas and approaches, whereas Singaporeans, I suppose, are quite flexible in this way. So they're not really having to, they can make a new kind of deal. It doesn't have to be just like the old ones. Here. So looking at some of these countries here, we can see that Japan is also kind of stuck on this one way of doing things, the way that we know. A lot of countries are, the US is again kind of in the middle. Denmark and China, very open to flexible ideas and new projects, new ideas, new ways of doing things. India also. And Japan and Italy are very conservative ones. In the end. Application. In a high level of uncertainty avoidance, very conservative, rigid structures, the danger of failures is, failing is not an option, so you can get them to be flexible by, the darkness of your vision of failure. There's a lot of societal conventions, people expect things to be done a certain way. People are expressive and can be emotional because they know that it's all, like Italy, it's all going to come back in the end to the same thing that they always do. High energy society, people feel that they're in control of their lives instead of feeling overwhelmed. So even if the beliefs that they have don't make any sense, if they all believe them to be true, then they're happy and they feel comfortable and confident. So, how do you deal with them? Be clear and concise about your expectations and goals, and set clearly defined parameters. But try to get them to think outside the box wherever you can. Recognize they're rules that everybody is following. And recognize that emotion is not really necessarily hurting the situation. Greeks, Italians, very emotional. Low uncertainty avoidance, very open to ideas and generally kind of inclusive, but they're not in a hurry, right? That's what happens sometimes. So the focus of the contract is going to be like changeable all the time. In these kind of countries, getting a focus is the key, right? But you're not going to get full structure on every point, but keeping focus and actually trying to give kind of openness and respect to people's ideas without showing off is another element. Long-term versus short-term orientation. This one I think is fairly easy to follow. US, here it says quick results, profits and losses are quarterly. It's a classic example. Time horizon, saving money versus spending money. Investment practices. Long-term orientation. People often wonder how to know what is true. For example, questions like what and how are asked more than why. So we understand the purpose of what we're doing, but we really want to know the steps that are going to go here. You're telling me that I'm going to have this benefit. Wouldn't it be better if we took a longer period of time? Thrift, that means saving in education or positive values. I'm sure we can see this in Vietnam. Well, Vietnam's got a bit of a long-term orientation. Singapore is longer, Japan is the longest, and Greece is the shortest, considering, interesting, that Greece is so much wanting to control things, but also in a short-term orientation. Vietnam, we're not super extreme on things, except for I guess one more thing about uncertainty avoidance. It's a lot easier if your history shows that you're going to bounce back every time, no matter how bad things get, right? If you are completely obliterated and you really have to worry about the future in a way that's always going to be life or death, then I think, you're definitely trying to figure out how to get some stability. Whereas Vietnam, no matter what happens, people seem to bounce back, recover, come back, and sometimes, pretty resilient, strong culture. I would say, I would like to see Czech Republic on this one, because I would imagine, Czechs are surprisingly risk averse, which was difficult for me. Here, I'll give I can give an example here. Let's look at France or Germany. France is better. This one out. All right, so in terms of uncertainty avoidance, when I worked in Czech Republic, it was open time, right? It was after the Soviet Union ended, and it was like the first time the Czech Republic was really free for a long time. So, had free press, we started a magazine there. Most of my advertisers there were people who were Western, a lot of North Americans, but also people who worked for advertising agencies who were also from North America. And so they were very open and like, oh, okay, yeah, we see what's going on here. This is something that worked in other places. We can give it a try. And then eventually, the management of all of those companies went from Nui foreign managers, and gradually the Czechs started to take over the different companies, which is their, and then they got very conservative. And it was much different trying to advertise with these 74s compared to these 46s. It was, they didn't want to risk their jobs. Like if they took a risk, they have to risk their jobs, so they don't want to do it. Whereas, taking a risk in the U.S. is fairly, you're trying to make, you're trying to have a big return, not a small return every time, which is short term also. Long-term orientation, obligations to the group, again, probably there's an overlap with collectivist. What should you do when you're dealing with these kind of places? I would say you should build relationships. Avoid talking about yourself too much. But also Australia, who's not that long-term, also thinks that way. People are more willing to compromised, yet this may not always be clear to outsiders. This is certainly so in a culture that scores high. I don't know what they mean then. Short-term orientation means that people want to know why. Why should I do this? Tell me, what's in it? What's going to happen? Why? Why should I do it? What's in it for me? People have strong ideas about what works and what doesn't because they've been like testing things over and over again. As people tend to oversell themselves, others will assess their assertions critically. Americans selling themselves comes pretty naturally. More harder ideas because you have this weird idea that you understand what's really happening. It's hard to get to compromise. No, it's right here. All we have to do is this. Indulgence versus restraint. Can we see like this one? If we can get a number for. Long term versus short term. Arab countries, short term, I guess because their long term is already just oil coming out of the ground, so they're not really worried about it. Australia, very short term, surprisingly. Well, I guess if they're so similar to the US. Some countries like China, they're really in for the long game. Germans are also like that. Germans are thinking about the future. And then here you have Japan and Singapore. So you can probably see it just in the rates of saving money and spending money in those countries. Last one here. Indulgence versus restraint. Hofstede's sixth dimension discovered and described with Michael Minkov is also relatively new and has less data supporting it. But countries with a high ratio of this allow or encourage relatively free gratification of own drives and emotions, such as enjoying life and having fun. There's a little bit of a decadence here. I would imagine the U.S. would put itself where? Pretty high in that, right? Vietnam is pretty low in that. And believe it or not, Czech Republic is quite strangely restrained. Like, they go up into a certain point and have a great time. But you just don't go past that point. You don't lose your mind. You keep it in control. In the end, it's like there's no reason to be too emotional about things. I think Vietnam's interesting in that way. It's like most of the time, everything is kind of just, a lot of countries that have restraint, they have big festivals. I think Spain would probably be a bit conservative in this way too. Let's try it. Where's Spain? Spain, yes, it's kind of conservative. But when they have the big festivals, when it really goes, the running of the bulls, the tomato festival, all of these festivals they have, then they really go crazy for a short period of time, and then it calms back down. So Czech Republic releases, it's like yin and yang energy. It's like just yin energy is released slowly every day. You notice that here's another one. You notice in Thailand, I think, I don't want to say indulgence just means that it's it's not necessarily encouraging, like sometimes you'll see an advertisement from Thailand and you'll be shocked. You're like, oh my God, they're talking about sex or something. and you're like, just like, oh, it's terrible, you know, it's too much, it's too far. And I think that's a little bit, you know, things that, you know, they shock people because they're outside of what they're publicly able to show in their daily lives. A very highly indulgent culture, optimistic ones, a lot of focus on personal happiness, and probably less religious and less worry about you know, societal punishment. These cultures, they don't take life super seriously. There's a difference between Saigon and Hanoi here, I'm sure about that. Enjoy debate and dialogue in meetings or decision making, feedback, work-life balance, high restraint, no jokes, don't make fun of the serious things in life, only express negativity about the world in informal meetings. Wow, so it's a pessimistic kind of point of view. That if you let people have too much freedom, then it's, you know, who knows? Who knows where it could be? Looking at these countries, there's quite a dramatic differences. Wow, Pakistan, no, don't have fun. Total restraint. Total restraint. Other countries that are pretty low, restrained cultures, Bangladesh, China, Italy, surprisingly, India, very, you don't expect to see a lot of, you know, it's shocking when things are, if there's a parade comes out. Like if you're in New Orleans in the US, and then a big jazz parade comes out of nowhere down the street, you're like, wow, this is great, this is so exciting. Whereas I guess a more pessimistic group would say, oh, what is this noise? What are you interrupting the flow, you know, why are you having fun when everyone else is working? And so Pakistan, 0, that's an incredible number. Again, a lot of religious conservative societies on that level. Okay, that was just a fun exploration of Hofstede and its applications to different countries. You can play with the model yourself. It's Hofstede Insights. Maybe it'll help you with your project to be able to make some generalizations about marketing and managing employees, and I think you should definitely use it. You should definitely apply it to your task. All right, so that is today's hour-long lesson. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.